Hey there, and welcome to today's live session. Sorry about the hiccup. If you were like wondering what's going on, let's just say things aren't always what they seem when you go live, and I mean very live. So let's jump into it. Remote working, endpoint backup. We're all doing it, at least half of that, right? Remote working. It might be time for some endpoint backup, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. My name is Rick Vanover here at Veeam. I'm on the product strategy team here, and we're actually going to talk about something that Veeam's had for a very long time, but we've not necessarily evangelized it this way. Endpoint backup, right? I'm doing it. You can do it too. Let's show you what we're going to talk about today. Now, there's a lot of things that have changed in the last few months. Working from home, endpoints moving. How have they moved? That's actually really an interesting consideration. Some organizations may have issued laptops, and those were, you know, easy to just leave the building. But did you have to buy laptops? Did you tell people to take the work desktop home? A lot of changes on this rapid shift. And there's also a burst in VPN connectivity, teleconferencing. The network has changed, like new data capture, new devices potentially. This is really putting, in my opinion, a lot of consideration on the endpoint and how and if we back it up, because I really am worried about data capture. And what I mean by that is, the endpoints may also be servers too. What I mean by that is there might be applications. Maybe people are installing SQL, or maybe they're installing other database apps and things like that. And the reality is you don't want to play a game and take a risk here. So there is data in small places, and the endpoints are that. There are new captures being done. I've talked to a lot of people who have made the work from home change, and they might use their work computer, but they also might use a tablet, they might use a desktop, and they might use other devices. And you have to really be specific on where is the data, how are we capturing it? Because I think about the endpoint and the backups being done, and I'm very happy that I do it, right? But the reality is we might have OneDrive for Business. We might have file share mechanisms in place. We might have VPN and remote access systems that are how organizations are supposed to consume data, but are they always doing that? I talked to a lot of people who have had an issue where their remote desktop systems were over capacity. So what's going to happen? People aren't going to use it. Then they'll work offline and synchronize up later, those types of things. And if you think about back to the middle of March, we had a really important question. Are we going to do it right, or are we going to do it right now? I know what we chose. We chose doing it right now because we had to. And the reality is, whenever you implement a change swiftly, things may not be as good as you'd want them. And this is an opportunity now, especially if we realize that maybe work from home is working and everybody is good with it, and it seems to be allowing the organization to keep up and keep going with their objectives. Maybe we need to put, I don't want to call it some permanence to it, but definitely some structure. And that's why I think endpoint backup is something that should be considered. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into some demos, and I'm going to do some screen shares here. And let me switch over out of PowerPoint, and I'm going to start real simple. Veeam Agent for Windows. That's the operating system I'm using right here. If you're not familiar with it, it is an agent. So it installs on your Windows system. I'm backing up every day at night, 10 hours ago, and it's run successful for a week, which is great. And let's just walk through and show you how simple this can be. Now here right away, I've actually done something pretty interesting. I've given the job a name called Work Stationary Laptop. I think it says Home Backup. It was a long name. But that tells me right away that that is my home work stationary laptop, because I have taken one of the laptops home so that I can do this work. So let's go ahead and launch the Edit Job Wizard. I want to show you how easy it is to do this. And I think I have to put it back on the other screen. Stand by, it's loading this up. Here it is. So Veeam Agent for Windows, by the way, it says it's synchronizing a license. The good news is actually you can use this product completely for free. There's just a few things that I'm going to show you that you can't do with the free edition, but by far the free edition is going to be suitable for most use cases for capturing your endpoints, making sure you don't lose data. So here's the name of the backup job: work stationary home laptop. And this that's our domain name, so that's my username. Now, really interesting question here. What are we backing up? Well, I like backing up everything, right? It's a good idea because it makes it easy because you don't know what you would be missing. But what's really interesting, and something if you think about how people may work, is backing up external USB drives. That's pretty interesting if we get into the business of having USB drives, especially shipping them to and from people, maybe for collaboration where files are just too big, that type of thing. That might be an interesting thing, as well as you can do individual volume level backups as well as file level backup. Now, this is probably the most amazing, awesome, important, powerful, any type of good word you can think of, part of the backup wizard. And I'm going to start with like a kind of a simple view first, and then go into more advanced options. The question here is, where are we going to put our backups? Local storage that's one option. If I have an external USB drive, I can put the backup there. I have a different system that I do that, and I'll come back to a really cool option on what you can do with that. The next option, and that's a real simple thing, right? Empower your people to come up with a USB drive, a terabyte, 2 terabyte drive, the free backup, done, sorted. Great way to do it. Now, also, if you have people at home or even yourself with a network attached storage device at home, that is a great target as well. And that's the shared folder option. So like Synology, QNAP, low end NASs, home NASs, that would be a good place for these backups as well. Now I'm going to transition to some of the more kind of powerful and interesting options. The next one here is a Veeam backup repository. So a Veeam backup repository, that is Veeam backup and replication, and I'm going to show you that here in a second. I have a home lab. Okay, so it's, maybe it's just me, but you can use Veeam Community Edition for up to 10 workstations to back up for free. That's an interesting angle. Now, here, the next two options are kind of interesting for organizations because you might want to think about having the backups go on to a resource on the internet. So I'm running out of colors here in my Zoom-It, but let's start with the Cloud Connect repository. This is a service provider, or you could run Veeam Cloud Connect for the enterprise. And the thought is this is a backup repository in the sky. It's backup storage as a service, and I can have the endpoint backups sent to that service provider. That's really, really powerful so that you'll capture it and as the organization have a lot of control over it. Let's see if I have one more color. I think I do. Then you can also send your backups to Microsoft OneDrive. And in the bottom selection here for Microsoft OneDrive, OneDrive or OneDrive for Business can be a target for these backups. So, in many cases, organizations have OneDrive for Business as part of their Microsoft agreement. Everybody can get OneDrive for free, maybe or not, in regards to how much capacity a backup would be. That might be a consideration for OneDrive, but it's not for OneDrive for Business for most endpoint backups. This is a really powerful set of options, and hopefully you're impressed with my Zoom-It skills. But the reality here is it's very flexible on where you put these image-based backups of these Windows and Linux systems. I'll get to that here in a second. I mentioned that I'm using a Veeam backup and replication server, so I'm using a repository. You don't necessarily have most homes operate that way, but it's an option if you want. If you're a little bit of a home labber, let's do it. And this is the repository that I'm putting my backups on. One thing I've done is make a dedicated resource for the endpoints. It's separate from my servers at home, which, yes, I do have servers. Oh, this is an interesting thing that I don't use it, but I want to highlight it because it's actually really powerful. There is an opportunity for a backup cache when you do backups with Veeam Agent for Windows. The thought here is that if there's a backup that needs to happen that's destined to be offline or over the internet or to a remote target, but something like a laptop, maybe I went to the cabin for the weekend, I'm not connected to the network here, I'll still take that incremental backup And when I come back on the network, it'll sync it back up. That's actually pretty cool. You can have really interesting um, ways to not miss restore points as you go the through your backups. And then, of course, a schedule. This is a pretty flexible scheduler. Same thing we have for virtual machines. And the important thing to note here is that I recommend doing backups daily. So I'm doing them 2:30 a.m. for this system. That's a good time. Now, it gets a little bit more interesting because especially if you're using removable media. Now, on the other system, I am doing it this way, but I want to highlight that if your connected media is your backup target, like an external USB drive, you have the option to actually eject it once that backup is completed. So that's a really nice kind of pre-ransomware readiness bit by having your backup target offline. So it doesn't even have to be impacted if there's a ransomware issue on the endpoint because the drive is offline. Really interesting angle. You can do that for free. So that's pretty cool. Great if you're on Windows, but what about Linux? Well, the good news is you can do this on Linux too. So I want to show you something real quick. Now, I need you guys to bear with me. I am a Windows person through and through, but believe it or not, I can do a little bit of Linux as well. So here I am on an Ubuntu system, and let's go in there real quick and run veeam config. And let's log in to do it correctly. If I was smart, I would have had this ready to go, but let's do that. Okay, so let's do it actually this way. Yeah, so here's the Veeam agent for Windows, and I apologize, I don't have my Zoom it for Linux working so well. I tried it, but it didn't work. But anyways, I'm just going to configure this job, Veeam agent for Linux backup, and here it's real similar. It's really the same options, but it's just ported to Linux. What's the name of the backup job? What am I backing up? Doesn't this look familiar? Yeah, it's the same thing for Linux. It doesn't have exactly all the same logic, but it's very similar. It does have similar repository options. It doesn't have OneDrive, but it does have Cloud Connect, shared folder, local storages, as well as a Veeam repository. Drop in some creds, and then same target, my Windows and Linux backups going to the same place. If you had applications like Oracle and SQL, you could prepare those, MySQL, I should say. And then a schedule. I'm running this at 6 a.m. And just for demo's sake, let's run it now. Okay. So I'm running this backup job. All right. So what does this mean? Especially when I think about what's going on in my network and on my home system. So this is my home Veeam backup and replication server. I have agent-based backups. You know, I've got my kids backup, my wife's PC being backed up. And if you think about what you might be dealing with at home, maybe your spouse is working from home, or your significant other, or your roommate, you know, you could do backups for them in many cases for free. The one that's running here, that is that Veeam agent for Linux, the Hyper-V Ubuntu. It's underway. So I just started that, and you have this kind of nice central managed way to look at these backups. And if you wanted to do restores, here's the agent-based restore right there. Just comes off the restore menu. That incremental backup of Linux is done. Really effective. So if you think about the increments, those are going to be nice and small, especially when you think about going to OneDrive or OneDrive for Business or the service provider target with Cloud Connect. You're not going to take up a lot of bandwidth. But if I wanted to restore from an agent, for example, I'll just do a file level recovery, which is probably one of the more common types of restore scenarios. And I've got both, so it's going to ask me Windows or Linux, but in this case, I'll keep life simple for you and do Windows. And so as I mentioned, I have all of these different systems here, my son's computer, my daughter's laptop, my wife's PC, and my own PCs as well. And I could get a little bit more consistent with the naming, right? But I keep it that way. And you can see all of the different incremental backups. The history is there. And then if you want to give it a reason, you can to restore the data. And what happens, especially for Windows systems, when you do a file level recovery, what it does is it opens up the backup target and you're browsing the file system. So especially if you kind of don't know what you need, you got to browse a little bit, you can find it. It'll crack open the file system and allow me to browse this. And Alternatively, I could restore just the whole system if I wanted to. I have bare metal recovery options, and that's included in the free edition. So the community edition, by the way, if you're just tuning in, the topic of the day is endpoint backup. And the Veeam Community Edition is a great way to get started in this regard. So I'm going to show you something here real quick while this loads up. There it is. So here's my backup of the computer I'm talking to you on. And I keep a lot of the stuff I need here, like some of my Veeam license files and Veeam installs. If I want to pull in some user data, go into the RIC document path. Now, here's the thing. If you're like me and you're like a lot of your users, you're supposed to use OneDrive for Business, but do you? Most of the time, well, looks like I have a couple of things in my documents as well. Maybe I need to protect that. And that's not a lot of stuff, but most of the stuff I back up is in OneDrive. But the thought here is, again, there will be capture, even as recent as I have, well, chat logs yesterday. I have stuff, ransomware paper that's, a forum edit. Lots of work that I've been doing is all being captured. So this is the Veeam agent for Windows, and this is where it goes in the console, and that's where the Veeam agent for Linux will go as well. And I mentioned the Veeam Community Edition is a great way to get started. And so as we wrap up here, I just want to show you Veeam Community Edition is a great way for free that you can get started with backing up endpoints, backing up laptops. You may have virtual machines at home. You can back those up as well, but 10 workloads, unlimited amount of ad hoc backups, right? And this is free, right? And if you don't want to make that server approach with centralized storage, if you don't have multiple endpoints at home, you can go to the physical Veeam agent for Windows page here, and there is a free edition. The free edition doesn't have the application processing, has a little bit less of the central management, but by all means, the free edition is really going to have the basics for what you would need. So you can go to veeam.com, you can download this, and we've had well over 1 million downloads of Veeam Agent for Windows since it's been out. So this is a very tried product. It works on servers, works on Windows 10, Windows 8, Windows 7, and higher. So Windows 7 and higher is what it works for. 64-bit. You got to check it out. So hopefully that's a good introduction to the need to back up endpoints, because chances are the data is being captured and it may not be backed up. Had a question from Nicer. He says, what product version am I using? So I am already on Veeam Backup and Replication v10, and then Veeam Agent for Windows version 5, or is it 4? I think that's the current version. So I just updated my home lab recently. So if you go to downloads here, this is probably the easier way to get the version number. If you just look at Veeam Availability Suite or Veeam Agent for Windows and Linux, those are the ones I'm using. So I'm using the latest and greatest different versions, but they are available right now for download at veeam.com. I don't usually use the betas at home for like my live systems. I'd use that in a lab, right? But we just had V10 and the Agents Go available, so I'm all up to date here at home. And that's another thing to keep in mind, is that updating is very seamless with Veeam Agent for Windows, and that goes both ways. I've had some people have Windows 8 installed and then they upgraded to Windows 10, and Veeam Agent for Windows supported Windows 10 at the time, and it actually just went through with an incremental backup. There's a lot of changes, but Veeam Agent for Windows is pretty smart when it comes to Windows updates as well. So hopefully that was a good way to get a sense of the agent for Windows capturing home backup data. A lot of it you can do for free. Now we're going to be doing an event, by the way, and if you're following Veeam, I'm sure you've heard, but we have an event called Veeam On, and it's going to be next month. You can actually get more information about the Veeam agents, especially when it comes to server workloads and data center bits. But June 17 and 18, you can sign up for free. I have a little side hustle, I like to say. I help out the content team with some of the breakouts, and I got to tell you, there's going to be a really good list of content here. This is one that I'm doing about cloud economics. That was a fun one to do. We got ransomware. Oh, look at that, me again, right? But we've also got Office 365 backup with Corinne on my team, and the latest about the NAS backup engine with Michael. You want to learn about Kubernetes, containers, performance in V10. VMon is the place to be. So thank you for those who dropped a few questions, and thank you, Christian, for helping me out, and Mark on the video production team. Have a great holiday weekend if that's your calendar spot this week. And on behalf of the Global Veeam team, thanks for attending the live stream.